In this video, I'll share 5 vegetables that practically grow themselves. If you happen to be new to gardening, the last thing I would want to see is for you to fail on your first season. Some vegetables are pretty difficult to grow, like these cucumbers next to me. They require a pretty significant amount of work, like pruning and training, but other vegetables are pretty easy. And that's the focus of this video, 5 vegetables you can grow with basically no gardening experience. In addition to talking about the vegetables, I'll mention some specific varieties that I recommend growing that we've found to be very reliable and easy to grow. If you want even more ideas for easy to grow vegetables, I have an article linked down in the description with several more options. So the first vegetable that basically grows itself in the garden is lettuce. With that said, some lettuces are a lot easier to grow than others, namely romaine lettuces or head type lettuces can be a little bit trickier to grow and they take longer to produce their harvest. Instead, if you want the easiest option, opt for leaf lettuces or Bibb lettuces. These varieties are very quick to produce and you can begin harvesting them at basically any stage of growth. A couple things to keep in mind when growing lettuce is most of them are not heat tolerant unless the variety specifies that it can handle higher heat. You'll want to grow your lettuce in the shoulder seasons, also known as spring and fall. Some great varieties you can try starting with are Butter Crunch, which is just as crunchy and delicious as it sounds. And if you want to branch out into something a little more interesting, you can try the Flashy Troutback variety. The next vegetable that's super easy to grow is my personal favorite, peppers. We love peppers here. In fact, we have an entire channel dedicated to growing peppers called Pepper Geek. And when it comes to fruiting vegetables like tomatoes and cucumbers and peppers, I think peppers might be the easiest of them all. Unfortunately, the most popular pepper variety, the bell pepper, tends to be a little bit more difficult to grow. So if you're looking for the easiest option, I probably wouldn't start there. Instead, if you want sweet peppers, look for some other varieties that are most noted for their yields, such as the Carmen F1 hybrid, or one of my favorites, the Jimmy Nardello. If you insist on growing bell peppers, I don't really blame you. They are very impressive to watch grow in the garden, and it's definitely possible, but I would look for varieties that have disease resistance and a tendency to produce larger harvests. But you don't have to stop at sweet peppers, of course. If you like it spicy, there are many hot peppers that are very easy to grow. I'd recommend going for smaller chili varieties like the Tide chili or Centaka, or maybe a smaller habanero variety. That way there's a good chance you'll end up with a larger harvest, more peppers at the end of the season than if you try to grow the largest peppers of all. I could say a million great things about growing peppers. You can grow them in raised beds like I have here, in containers, directly in the ground. And while they do require a little bit of extra attention, namely that you have to plant them early indoors before the hot weather so that they have a long enough growing season, they are very forgiving when it comes to fruiting plants, and there's just so much diversity. It's a great way to get into gardening. The next vegetable that really does seem to grow all by itself is garlic. To explain this, let me give you my 10-second explanation of how to grow garlic. Pull off some garlic cloves, put them in the ground around Halloween, wait, and then harvest your fresh garlic around mid-July. Okay, maybe it's not quite that simple, especially if you live in a warmer climate. However, garlic is super easy to grow. It's one of my favorite crops that always gets some space in our garden, and we haven't actually had to buy garlic seed since the first year we planted garlic. The most important thing to know before you plant garlic is the type of garlic you should be growing. There are 2 types, hardneck and softneck. Hardneck is what we grow here in New England because we have cold winters, and if you're living in zone 7 or under, you can probably be growing hardneck as well. If you live in a warmer place, zones 8 and above, you'll probably want to go for softneck garlic because it tends to do better in warmer climates. Garlic is one of those plants that actually improves over time, so if you harvest your garlic, save the cloves, and replant them in the fall, your crop will actually adapt to your region over the course of several seasons, leading to better harvests and better quality garlic in the long run. This is only about half of the garlic that we grew this year, and it only took up about a quarter of one of our raised beds, so you can see just how much you can pull out of your garden from a relatively small amount of space. It's great for filling in extra spots in the garden as well. You can interplant it with pretty much anything else. The plants are very slender and small, and like I said, it really can be as simple as amending your soil properly, planting in the fall, and waiting to harvest in the summer. I don't have too many recommendations because we haven't grown too many varieties of garlic, but this is Chesnock Red, and we've also had great results with the variety called Music, both of which are hardneck varieties and grow really well here in New England. Before I get to the next easy vegetable to grow, I want to thank Bootstrap Farmer for sponsoring this video. We've been using Bootstrap's durable, high-quality gardening supplies for many years now, and they continue to innovate and bring us long-lasting supplies for the garden. The super sturdy 10 by 20 trays are a staple in our garden for starting seeds and easily moving plants around. And we recently got a few of these mesh trays for watering plants outdoors, drying flowers, and curing onions and garlic. Click the link in the description to get your own USA-made, high-quality gardening supplies at bootstrapfarmer.com. Now back to the video. The next group of crops that practically grow themselves in the garden are beans and peas. And while these aren't the same thing, they are both in the legume family, and I consider them pretty much the same when it comes to planting and growing. The only difference is peas are colder climate, so we plant them super early in the early spring, while beans are warmer season crops, so you have to wait for the weather to warm up before sowing your seeds. Snap peas are super easy to grow in the early spring. You can direct sow them right into the ground. As soon as the soil has thawed and it's workable, plant your pea seeds and they'll come up nice and quick. Peas and pole beans both like something to climb up. That's the only caveat here, is you should provide something for them to climb, whether it's a proper trellis or an A-frame or even an old ladder leaned against your house, or even just a simple stake will suffice. These plants do like to climb, but if you want to make it even easier, you can just grow bush beans, which don't require any support. They'll form into a small bush and give you a good harvest of beans. These veggies really are set it and forget it. As long as the soil has some moderate fertility in it, you can direct sow any of these. I do recommend soaking your peas and beans before planting, just overnight before you plan on planting them out. But other than that, keep the soil evenly moist and your plants will grow just fine. When it comes to variety selection, I always suggest sugar snap peas. They're just a classic. They do well, they're disease resistant, and they like those cooler temperatures. And for beans, the world is your oyster. There are super long beans, there are yellow beans, striped bean varieties. And in our experience, pretty much all of them seem to be easy to grow. And the last thing that is super easy to grow in the garden are chives. Now I know this might not be considered a proper vegetable, it's more of a culinary herb, but it may just be the most useful thing in our entire garden because I come out and use chives almost on a daily basis. There are so many great things about chives, starting with the fact that they are perennial, meaning that they come back year after year. Even if you live in a really cold climate, chives will die back in the early winter when the frosts hit, but then will re-emerge in the early spring, making them one of the earliest things you can get out of the garden. Not only that, but every year your chives will flower. Chive blossoms are not only beautiful and purple and very abundant, but they're also edible and delicious. They have this sweet, oniony flavor that is super delicate and delicious on eggs or salads, really versatile and useful. And of course, the foliage of the chives is what is most often used in the kitchen. You can be harvesting fresh chive foliage all year long. I really mean that. It comes up super early in the spring, lasts all summer long, deep into the fall, and even into early winter, even after that first frost hits. These plants are just so amazing. They're in the allium family along with onions and garlic, but I just love using this more delicate flavor in the kitchen. I wouldn't worry too much about variety. If you find something at the nursery, just pick it up. But I would suggest taking some time to choose the location where you'll plant it wisely. That's because, like I said, this plant isn't going anywhere. It can last for many, many years. And if you put it somewhere where you want to have more annuals and more turnover in the garden, you might have to move it or dig it out, which can set it back. So those are some of the easiest veggies you can grow in the garden, great for beginners or veteran gardens that just want to take it easy and have some reliable plants in the garden. Let me know your favorite hands-off veggies to grow in the garden, and thanks for watching Geeky Greenhouse.